Hello again. Welcome to episode 5 of the reading of Human Readable, a novella by me, Cory Doctorow, which I'm reading in parts and podcasting. The novella was originally published in the anthology Future Washington and is forthcoming in the Science Fiction Book Club's Best Short Novels of the Year and is on the Locus Award list for Best Novella for the year. Actually, there's a bunch of Locus Award categories in which I'm on the ballot this year: Best Short Story and Best Novella and Best Novel for my novel Someone Comes to Town, Someone Leaves Town. If you're fans of those works, you can go to craphound.com, and on the front page there's a link that'll take you to the voting interface for the Locus Awards. They're pretty cool awards to win. They're the most populous awards in the field. They're the ones that have the most number of voters, and it's always really exciting. I won the Locus Award for Best First Novel a couple of years ago for my novel Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom. It was a real thrill. So it's been a good week since Sunday, since my last installment. Yesterday I went and gave a talk for the Open Rights Group, a digital rights group here in the United Kingdom that I helped found. It was very well attended. It was great to see everyone, and people were very kind and attentive, and I had a good time doing it. I'm leaving for Boston on Sunday. I'm going to be giving public talks at MIT and Harvard, Olin College, and then at Boscone, the Northeastern Regional Science Fiction Convention, for the weekend. So that's going to be really fun. And I guess the other news is that this morning's mail had a copy of Make magazine in it, which is the magazine from O'Reilly. It's kind of a contemporary version of Popular Mechanics or Popular Science. It's issue number 5 is out, and I've got a column in it, as I have had in the previous 4 issues. My co-editor at Boing Boing, Mark Frauenfelder, is the editor-in-chief, and he very kindly offered me a column when they started the magazine, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. So that column is available in the current issue of Make, which you can get on stands everywhere or at makezine.com. Well, that's all the news. Without further ado, here is Human Readable, installment number 5.
When he rang off the phone and joined her, finally, she straightened out her smart cardigan and said, "Rayner, you're certainly looking well." "Funded," he finished, with a small smile. The Emergent Network Suppliers Industry Association's new offices were in a nice Federal Revival building off DuPont Circle, with lots of stained glass that nicely set off the sculptural and understated furniture. "It's not as grand as appearances suggest, Trish. We got it for a song from the receivers in the Church of Scientology's bankruptcy, furnishings included. It is nice, though, don't you think?" "It's lovely," she said. Around her, staffers bustled past in good suits and good shoes and smart haircuts. "Hard to believe you only set up shop a week ago," she said. "It came furnished, remember?" he said. "Oh, yes, so you said." She watched a kid who looked like he'd gone tops in his class at the Naval Academy put his ankles up on the plasticized return beside his desk and tilted his chair, throwing his head back with wild laughter at whatever it is some other hill rat, in her mind it was a key congressman's aide, some old frat buddy of Mr. Navy 2048, was saying in the phone's other end. She looked back, and Rayner saw that he was staring where she had. "Well, it's a far cry from academic research," he said. "I know you'll be very good at it. You can explain things without making it seem like an explanation. The first lesson I ever learned on the Hill was, if you're explaining, you're losing," he said. "Yeah, I've heard that. Well, you're the old hand here. I'm just learning as I go, trying not to make too many mistakes and to learn from the ones I do make." "Do you want some free advice, Rayner?" He sat down in one of the chairs, which bulged and sloshed as it conformed itself to his back and butt. He patted the upholstered jelly beside him. "You may always assume that I would be immensely grateful for your advice, Trish," he said. She sat down and crossed her legs, letting her sensible shoe hang loose. "Right. D.C. is a busy place. In academic circles, in tech circles, you might get together to feel out your opponent, or to make someone's acquaintance, or to see an old friend. You might get together to enjoy the company of another human being. We do that in D.C. after working hours. Strictly evenings and weekends. When you schedule a meeting during office hours, it has to have a purpose. Even if it appears to have no purpose, it has a purpose. There's a protocol to meetings, a secret language that's known to every hill rat and written nowhere. What time you have the meeting, who's there, who's invited, who knows it, how long you schedule, whether you cater. They all say little things about the purpose of the meeting. Even if you have no reason to call the meeting, one will be read into it. If this was any other city in the world, it would make perfect sense for you to look me up once you got to D.C. We're still friends. I still think about you from time to time. But here in D.C., you calling me over for a meeting, this kind of meeting, at this time of day, it means you're looking to parley. You want to strike a deal before my bill goes to committee. I don't know how well you know the Hill, so I don't want to impute any motives to you, but if you took a meeting like this with anyone else, that's what they'd assume. Rayner's forehead crinkled. No fretting, she said. Then she smiled a sad smile. Oh, fret if you want. You're a big boy. He twiddled his thumbs, caught himself at it, and folded his hands in his lap. Huh, he said. Well, I did want to talk to you because it's been a while, and because we meant a lot to each other. I also wanted to talk to you about the bill, because that's what I'm here to do at a pretty decent salary. But I also wanted to see you, because I had an idea that you'd be different here in your native habitat, and well, that's true. She refused to let that make her self-conscious. Of course she was different, but it wasn't geography. The last time they'd seen each other, they were lovers and friends. Now they were ex-lovers, who were being paid to accomplish opposing, mutually exclusive objectives. She knew that there was a certain power in not saying anything, so she wrapped herself in silence and waited for him to say something. She didn't have to wait long. Your bill is going to committee? Well, I certainly hope so, she said. That's what I'm here for, after all. The discussion draft has been circulating for a week, and we're confident we'll see it introduced and assigned to committee by the end of this week. That's what we're told, anyway. It's got strong bipartisan support. Selling Congress on the importance of human-generated governance is pretty easy. Wouldn't want to be in your shoes. He grinned. You're trying to psych me out. Maybe, she said, grinning back. But that's nothing compared to the psych job that we're getting down at my office. She told him about the phone weirdness, the oddball traffic management. Someone on your side has a funny sense of humor. His smile faded. If you're still trying to fake me out, he said, if you're seeing corruption on the net, it's because you're looking so hard you can't help but find it. You're reading malice into accident. Dead spots aren't personal, you know. This is a law of nature. The networks emerge solutions, and they're the best they can come up with. If you don't like the results, talk to nature, not me. She shrugged. Whatever, Rayner. I know what's happening. You'll believe what you want to believe. She pursed her lips and made an effort at controlling her irritation. It's really happening, and it's not helping your side. If you know who's responsible, you might let him know that the dirty tricks are what convinced Senator Beauchamp's staff to greenlight the bill. Conspiracy is supposed to lurk beneath the surface. It doesn't look so good when it's exposed to fresh air and sunshine. You've got to be kidding, he said. Doesn't matter, I suppose. All right, message received. If I happen to run into someone whom I think should hear it, I'll be sure to pass it on, okay? That's all I ask, she said. You want to talk about the bill now? Have you seen the discussion draft? He squirmed. No, he admitted. I didn't know it existed until just now. I'd offer to send you a copy, but I expect it would take a week to arrive if it ever did. Why don't you ask that guy? She gestured at the Navy man. To get you a copy. He looks like he knows his way around. And then drop by my office if you want to chat about it. She stood up and tugged at her cardigan again. It's been very nice seeing you, she said, picking up her coat and mitts. Good luck settling in. He gave her a hug, which felt weird. Hugging was strictly west of the Mississippi, and she broke it off firmly and showed her to the door. The first snows were coming in, and the steps were slightly icy, so she maneuvered them slowly and carefully. When she reached the road, he was no longer in the doorway. He was standing right behind her, breath coming out in foggy huffs. Trish, he said, then stopped. His arms dropped to his side, and his shoulders slumped. Rayner, she said, keeping her voice calm and neutral. God, he said, God, how'd this happen, Trish? Look, I've never been happy the way I was with you. I haven't been that happy since. God, Trish! Raynor, she said again, taking one of his hands firmly, motherly. Raynor, stop it. You're here to do a job, and your job requires that you and I keep it on a professional level. It doesn't matter how it happened. But it did, didn't it? She'd left him to come east and do something that he thought of as wrong-headed and backwards and superstitious. But she'd left him and not the other way around, and he'd never recovered, though she'd built herself a new life here. It wasn't a contest, but she was winning anyway. It doesn't matter. We respect each other. That's enough. He deflated, and she said, "Oh, come here," and gave him a long and soulful hug right there on the street, knowing that she was giving the hug, and he was taking it. Then she let him go, spun him round, and gave him a little push back toward his office. By the time she reached the corner and looked back over her shoulder, he was nowhere to be seen. That afternoon her phone started ringing normally, with actual people on the other end. Her outbound calls were connected, her email was delivered, her car got her home in record time. She sighed as she eased it into her driveway and carried her briefcase inside and poured herself a very small glass of Irish whiskey so rare it had been known to make grown men weep. Normally she saved it for celebrations, but if she was celebrating something, she was damned if she knew what it was. Her phone rang as she was licking the last few drops of liquor from the little glass. It was the lawyer, with news. "I just stopped by the office and found a messenger on the doorstep. He had a hard copy of a press release from Senator Beauchamp's office. They're introducing the bill in the morning. Congrats, kid. You did it." Trish set down the glass and said, "Whoopee," very quietly and very emphatically. "You're darn tootin'," the lawyer said, "and double for me." Of course, it wasn't over by a long shot. Getting a bill introduced was not the same as getting it through committee. Getting it through committee was not the same as getting it passed in the Senate, and getting it passed in the Senate was not the same as getting it passed in the House. And then who the hell knew what the hereditary chimp-in-chief in the Oval Office would do when it was passed through the bars of his cage with his morning banana? But she had ridden back into town less than a year before, and she had gone from nothing to this. The ACLU was supporting the bill, and EFF and EPIC, all the old civ-lib mafia, had opened their arms to her. She poured herself one more very small whiskey, gave herself a fragrant bath, and put herself to bed, grinning like a fool. "There are 4 news crews, 6 print reporters, and a couple of others here to see you," the office manager said. The office phones were out again, but that hadn't stopped a fair number of determined people from figuring out that they could actually move their physical being from one part of Washington to another and have a real old-fashioned face-to-face. The lawyer and she had each taken a dozen press calls that morning, with their embedded reporters from Columbia J School perched obtrusively in the corners of their office, taking copious notes and filming non-stop. Others? A mixed bag. Some hill people, some I'm not sure about. Trish stood and stretched out her back, listening to it pop. She usually worked in bursts, typing or talking for an hour, then taking a little walk to gather her thoughts and touch base with her coworkers. Today she'd been glued to her seat from 7 a.m. to after lunchtime, and her back and butt were shrieking at her. She walked into the front area, trailed by her reporter. She recognized some of the journos and some of the congressional staffers, a local rep from a European privacy think tank in Brussels, and Raynor. He was turned out in a very natty suit and a Homburg, a fashion that had recently come back to D.C., but she knew that he'd been put together by a personal shopper. Her own board had suggested to her, matter-of-factly, that she should get one of her own, once the bill cleared committee. Since she'd be doing tons of press, and as sharp as a dresser as she fancied herself, she was no pro. Her prodigious talents, they assured her, lay elsewhere. He took her hand with both of his and gave her a long, intense handshake that drew stares from the journos and the think tank man. "Nice to see you again, Ms. McCavity," he said somberly. "A pleasure as always, Mr. Feinstein," she said. "I'm sorry to drop in on you unannounced," he said, "but I hoped that I could just have a moment of your time." Belatedly, he remembered to take off his silly hat, and then he fumbled for the right way to hold it, settling for dropping it to his waist and upending it. She thought he looked like a panhandler in a Charlie Chaplin movie, and she suppressed a smile. His curly hair had been gelled into a careful configuration that reminded her of the glossy ringlets of a black poodle. "I suppose we can do that," she said. She turned to the other visitors. "Who's got a 3 p.m. deadline?" she said. Two of the print reporters held up their hands. "You, then you," she said. "Who's got a 5 p.m. filing deadline? 6 p.m.? 10 p.m.? She triaged them all, promised to meet the think tank man at an Ethiopian place in Adams Morgan, and then led Rayner into her office and closed the door. He looked at her embedded reporter and cocked his head. "Sorry, Rayner," she said. "I have a shadow for the duration." "Just pretend he isn't there." "You don't mind, do you, dear?" she said to the reporter, who was very young and very bright and missed nothing. He shook his head and made some notes. "The bill's dead," Rayner said, after he'd sat down. "Oh, really?" she said. "Just heard from Senator Rittenhouse personally. He takes the position that this should be in Commerce, not Judiciary, and is calling hearings to make that happen." Rittenhouse was another powerful committee chairman, and this wasn't good news. What's more, he was in the pocket of the network operators, and had been for a decade, so much so that the editorialists and talk radio types called him the Senator from the Internet. Still, it wasn't catastrophic. "That's interesting," she said, "but it's a far cry from killing the bill. It's pretty standard, in fact. Just slows things down." She smiled at him. He was just a kid sometimes, so out of his depth here. He reminded her of the relatives she'd met that day, the little boys in their miniature suits running down the beach. He shifted in his seat and fondled his hat brim. "Well, I guess we'll see. My press liaison has set up a post-mortem debate on one of the news networks tonight, and I thought that you might want to represent the other side." She smiled again. He was twice the rhetorician that she was, but he had no idea how to play the game. She'd have to be careful to bruise and not break him.